Welcome back to the show, everybody. It's DinaKalmeta here. And for today's news, I do have some headlines I'd like to share with you. And in fact, I first want to talk about Israel. And hopefully I can still do that here. I'm not sure if many of you are aware, but I have been heavily censored here on YouTube, and particularly as it pertains to Israel. So hopefully with the recent events, that has changed. So I'd like to first bring you to this report written by Prophecy Newswatch. And they ask the question, could this recent peace deal be the first steps to Daniel's 927 covenant? Let's find out. Something historic has just happened. After years of war, Israel and Hamas have agreed to move forward with a U.S.-brokered peace plan designed by President Trump. The deal, which includes the release of hostages, phased ceasefires, and a new governing structure of Gaza, has been accepted by all parties, backed by an international coalition. A board of peace, reportedly with potential oversight from the United States and European figures like Tony Blair, that will supervise the agreement's implementation. Multiple nations will act as guarantors. The fighting will stop. Gaza will begin rebuilding. For much of the world, this looks like a long-awaited miracle. But for students of Bible prophecy, it also raises profound, even chilling questions. Could this be the beginning of the peace Daniel foretold, the one that sets the final prophetic clock ticking? So as we know, Daniel 9:27 describes a figure who will confirm the covenant with many. The wording is striking. Not create, but confirm. The Hebrew implies strengthening or enforcing an existing agreement. President Trump has already boasted how this plan is not just about Gaza, but the start of peace for the entire Middle East. This is just a start, and clearly there are plans to bring about something bigger in the future. For now, it is one step at a time until there is momentum for a much bigger peace plan with more nations involved. And if that sounds familiar, well, it should. Daniel's prophecy suggests that a future world leader will one day make firm an already existing covenant involving Israel and the many. In prophetic language, that act of confirmation marks the beginning of a final 7-year period of history, the time leading to the return of Christ. This could be the kind of foundation that one day evolves into that covenant, an early stone in a structure that prophecy says will one day dominate the world's attention. So what makes this peace deal unusual? Well, it's its multinational oversight. It's not just between Israel and Hamas. It's guaranteed by a coalition of outside powers, the United States, Arab nations, European involvement through figures like Tony Blair. At the center of this structure is something called the Board of Peace, a global oversight body that will help govern Gaza and ensure compliance. That may sound administrative, but spiritually, it's fascinating. Revelation 13 and 17 and Daniel 2 and 7 all describe the rise of a final world power with 10 leaders or kings who share authority under one dominant figure. The beast with 10 horns in Revelation represents a political alliance that ultimately serves one ruler, the Antichrist. Could Trump's Board of Peace, or its future evolution, be a first step towards such a structure, a prototype for global oversight that later expands into a council of 10? It's far too early to say, but it's certainly worth watching. Prophecy tells us that the final covenant will not just be signed by Israel and its neighbors, it will be enforced and confirmed by an outside authority. This peace plan, for the first time, creates exactly that mechanism, a multinational body empowered to guarantee Middle Eastern peace. That's new, and it's deeply significant. While the current agreement doesn't publicly specify a 7-year term, some reports suggest a long-term phased agreement, possibly with multi-year checkpoints or reviews. For prophecy watchers, that detail matters enormously. In Daniel's timeline, the final week represents 7 years, the period of which the Antichrist rises. Israel experiences false peace, the temple is desecrated, and the world moves towards this second coming of Christ. So while there is currently no talk of a 7-year term, this is a key prophetic watchpoint. If at any stage this peace plan or its successor is publicly fixed to a 7-year duration or formally confirmed by a major world leader, we would be staring at one of the most dramatic prophetic markers of our lifetime. But for now, we simply note it and stay watchful. Ezekiel 38 speaks of a time when Israel will live securely, all of them, without walls. It describes a season of apparent calm, a peace so convincing that enemies later strike without warning. If this peace plan holds, Israel may soon enjoy something like that. Open borders, normalized trade, regional partnerships, and quiet streets after years of rockets and chaos. No doubt this will take years after the trauma of October 7th, but this is truly what the people of Israel long for: peace. And it will one day feel like peace. But sadly, it will be the kind of peace that prophecy calls false peace, a calm before judgment. The Apostle Paul warned, "When they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3. True peace will not come until the Messiah is ruling from Jerusalem. So what should we be watching for next? If we are witnessing the early stage of something prophetic, several key developments could follow. Expansion of the Board of Peace. If it grows to include 10 nations or 10 leaders, that could mirror the 10 kings imagery of Daniel in Revelation. A broader regional accord, if this peace plan extends beyond Gaza to encompass Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and others, with many, that would fit into Daniel's phase precisely. A confirming world leader. Prophecy points to a single prince who enforces and guarantees peace. If a future figure rises to take credit or authority over such a covenant, that would be another crucial sign. A defined 7-year term. As noted, if the peace structure ever becomes explicitly 7 years in length, the prophetic countdown could truly be ready to begin. Each of these would move the world closer to fulfillment of Daniel's words. In the meantime, good news for Israel. The hostages were released back to their families after 2 years of war. So praise be to God for that miracle. The president gave a speech in Israel, a very good speech. I really do believe that the president wants what's best for Israel, and especially for the United States. But I really, really do hope that somebody teaches him Bible prophecy. Anyway, good news for Israel today. In the meantime, let's talk about Iran and Russia. Under tightening UN sanctions and frozen negotiations with Europe, Iran is deepening its nuclear military alliance with Russia. This week, Mohammad Eslami, head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, met with the deputy CEO in Iran to advance peaceful nuclear energy cooperation. The talks centered on 2 nuclear agreements, one for small modular reactors across Iran and another for a $25 billion project to build 4 major power units. Both sides emphasized accelerating ongoing projects and expanding long-term cooperation under their 20-year strategic partnership. But the deepening alliance goes beyond energy. Earlier this year, Russia agreed to construct 8 nuclear plants in Iran. Now, leaked intelligence files reportedly suggest that the 2 nations are discussing a fighter jet deal, signaling a broader military partnership. As Iran faces mounting pressure from Western sanctions in the aftermath of its June conflict with Israel, Iran is turning to Moscow for both deterrence and survival, forging a new axis of power that could destabilize the balance in the Middle East. We kind of need to keep a close eye on Russia, Iran, and Turkey's relationship because eventually they're going to form an alliance with other nations, and I referenced this in the Prophecy News Report, but they're going to form this alliance and try and invade Israel, and that's called the Gog-Magog War, and I highly encourage you guys to go and study those scriptures if you have yet to do that, because it lays it out exactly what is going to happen and the judgment that will befall those nations that try and invade Israel. So definitely a very interesting scripture there, and we're watching these relationships build right now. And speaking of Russia, there has been some rumblings between Russia, NATO, and the U.S. NATO allies are discussing a more forceful response to Putin's increasing provocative actions, including by deploying armed drones along the border with Russia and easing restrictions on pilots to allow them to open fire on Russian aircraft. The talks are aimed at raising the cost for Moscow of its hybrid warfare and lay out clear countermeasures after a spate of airspace violations by Russian drones and jets, according to 4 NATO officials. Frontline states bordering Russia, backed by France and the UK, have initiated the discussions, which have since broadened to a larger group in the 32-strong alliance. Proposals include arming surveillance drones used to collect intelligence on Russian military activities and lowering the bar for pilots patrolling the eastern border to take down Russian threats. Another option is to conduct NATO military exercises on the border with Russia, especially in more remote and unguarded parts of the frontier. President Trump said last month that NATO should open fire on Russian aircraft that breach Allied territory. The U.S. president's remarks came after a flurry of the Russian provocations, including the first direct confrontation between NATO planes and Russian drones, in addition to the encounter in Polish airspace. Russian drones have also veered into Romanian territory, and MiG fighter jets crossed into Estonian airspace. Now, with that said, the Kremlin said on Sunday that Russia was deeply concerned about the possibility of U.S. supplying Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine, warning that the war had reached a dramatic moment with escalation from all sides. Trump stated on Monday that before agreeing to provide the missiles, he would want to know what Ukraine planned to do with them because he did not want to escalate the war between Russia and Ukraine. He said, however, that he had sort of made a decision on the matter. A Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said that the topic of the Tomahawks is an extreme concern. Now is really a very dramatic moment in terms of the fact that the tensions are escalating from all sides. Peskov said that if the missiles were launched at Russia, Moscow would have to take into account that some versions of the missile can carry nuclear warheads. He said, just imagine, a long-range missile is launched and is flying, and we know that it could be nuclear. What should the Russian Federation think? Just how should Russia react? Military experts overseas should understand this. Now, the Russian president said earlier this month that it was impossible to use the missiles without direct participation of U.S. military personnel, and so any supply of such missiles to Ukraine would trigger a new stage of escalation. The Financial Times reported on Sunday that the U.S. has been helping Ukraine mount long-range strikes on Russian energy facilities for months. They also said that U.S. intelligence helps Ukraine shape route planning, altitude, timing, and mission decisions, enabling Ukraine's long-range, one-way attack drones to evade Russian air defenses. Now, with that said, President Trump said that he spoke with the Ukrainian president on Saturday, and they discussed the possibility of Ukraine obtaining the long-range missiles, according to two sources with knowledge. Apparently, the call lasted for about 30 minutes, with one source stating that Zelensky described it in a statement as very positive and productive. He congratulated Trump on the Gaza peace deal and said that if the war could be ended, then surely other wars can be stopped as well, including the Russian war. He said, I informed President Trump about Russia's attacks on our energy system, and I appreciate his willingness to support us. We discussed opportunities to bolster our air defense, as well as concrete agreements that we are working on to ensure this. He said there are good options and solid ideas on how to truly strengthen us. There needs to be readiness on the Russian side to engage in a real diplomacy. This can be achieved through strength. The Sun is reporting that Putin's shadow war on the West is already underway as the Kremlin has entered what the military experts call Phase Zero. It means that Vlad is layering his ominous groundwork for a future conflict with NATO. The chilling warning comes from the respected Institute for the Study of War, which says that Moscow is now in the informational and psychological condition-setting phase of a potential showdown with the alliance. Analysts say the writing is on the wall and Russia may strike sooner than expected. According to Eastern European outlet Nexta, the Kremlin is already gaining significant experience in modern warfare. It also could launch new aggression without waiting for its army to fully recover from war in Ukraine, a sign that Moscow may strike sooner than Western intelligence expects. The expert said that NATO may not yet be at war, but Phase Zero has already begun. Now, in the meantime, it's being reported by several sources that the United States has signed a controversial new defense deal with Qatar that will allow the Gulf nation's Air Force to train inside a U.S. military base in Idaho. It sparked outrage from conservative commentators and renewed questions over national security. The agreement that was announced on Friday was formalized between U.S. Defense Secretary and Qatar's defense minister. It authorizes the Qatar Air Force to establish a training facility within Mountain Home Air Force Base about 50 miles southeast of Boise. Under the deal, Qatar's F-15 fighter jets and pilots will train alongside American crews under strict U.S. supervision. Pentagon officials stressed that the site would not be a foreign-controlled base, but an integrated training program within an existing U.S. installation. This announcement obviously ignited political backlash. Laura Loomer accused the Pentagon of handing over a U.S. base to a foreign power, calling the move an insult to American sovereignty. And of course, her post went viral across social media, drawing thousands of angry comments. But defense officials swiftly hit back, insisting that the base remains entirely under U.S. command and jurisdiction. A Pentagon spokesperson said that this is not a Qatar base. It is a U.S. facility hosting an allied training program, something we already do with nations like Singapore, the UK, and Germany. Experts say that Qatar's pilots would have no operational autonomy and would follow the same strict protocols used for other foreign training missions. Now, Mountain Home Air Force Base, home of the famed 366th Fighter Wing, the Gunfighters, already trains pilots from Singapore and boasts vast airspace ideal for high-speed combat drills. Qatar's program expands on a $12 billion deal signed in 2017 for 36 F-15QA jets, one of the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world. Pentagon officials said that the Idaho site offers training advantages impossible to replicate in the Gulf, including advanced ranges, weather variety, and access to joint U.S. tactical exercises. Analysts say that the move reflects a deepening strategic bond between Washington and Doha. Qatar already hosts the largest American military hub in the Middle East, from which U.S. operations across the region are coordinated. Extending training to U.S. soil, they argue, underscores growing trust between the two allies. The timing is notable, however, as Qatar has recently taken a lead diplomatic role in mediating ceasefires between Israel and Hamas. With that said, the United States and China entered another trade war on Friday. With growing tensions between the nations, CBS News is reporting that Chinese entities have been acquiring land in key locations near U.S. military bases, sparking national security concerns about possible spying or even a potential attack. Former national security official David Feith doubted the potential risk in an interview, and apparently he worked on U.S.-China policy for the State Department in the first Trump administration, and until April worked in Trump's second administration on the National Security Council. While there, he grew increasingly alarmed by where China owns America's farmland. He said that the ability to own large tracts of land, especially close to sensitive U.S. military and government facilities, can pose an enormous problem given the nature of technology today, which is that hostile actor from all across the world can very easily exploit access to land, access to buildings, and warehouses, as well as shipping containers. For China, he explained, owning farmland in the United States gives America's geopolitical rival more operating room for potential strikes. He says it's an entirely new way of war. This fear is why in 2023, North Dakota politicians blocked a Chinese company from building a corn mill near an Air Force base in Grand Forks. At the time, the company denied it would use the mill to spy on or harm the U.S. But China isn't the only nation buying American farmland. According to the most recent data available from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, non-Americans own about 45 million acres, or about 3.5% of agricultural land in the U.S. That's up about 70% from the decade earlier. Canadians own about a third of that. But beyond the farm, there is growing concern from Chinese-backed cryptocurrency mining operations in the U.S. Crypto mines, as they are known, are giant data centers where powerful computers solve complex mathematical problems to validate transactions with cryptocurrency. The advisor believes that they could be used for espionage or to sabotage the electric grid. The Bible tells us that in the last days we will hear of wars and rumors of wars, and that is exactly what we are seeing right now. Hopefully cooler heads will prevail, but I guess time will tell. And as always, I'll continue to keep you updated. But I'd love to hear from all of you, so please do leave your comments below this video. And when you have a free moment, come and visit me on my social media pages, as well as my website at www.cww7news.com. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, God bless and stay safe.